fun discussion here. We'll get into it in a bit more. This is Women's Money, Chapter 4. I'm Carrie Rattle, CEO and founder of Behavioral Sense, and proud to be a women's money mentor. And I realized as I'm standing here, I forgot to put my badge on tonight. Oops. So I am a women's money mentor, and we're going to get into budgeting this week, which the word itself strikes fear into people, I know, but we'll tackle it slowly. Good news, what I'm hoping to do for the next lesson is to have a credit score expert come and answer any question you have. So feel free to also bring friends. Bring spouses, girlfriends, whatever you want to do if you have mature kids. You'll also notice that Chapter 5, we start talking about debt and credit scores. There's a bit of reading to do, so I would suggest that you pace yourself and try to read that in advance. It's a lot of material to cover. And if we don't cover it all next week, that's okay. We'll spill over into, or sorry, not next week, next session. We'll spill over into the one after that because it's just so important for people. So housekeeping. We have Greater Ossining TV at the back of the room. Yay! Thank you for being here as always. The first hour will be recorded as we talk through the lesson, and then it's private time for people attending so we can talk about other things if you want to. So, going back to Chapter 3, which was tracking expenses. And just a quick review, I talked about the power and the magic of numbers. When you start writing down where the money is going every day, it's kind of fun because sometimes you see patterns that you didn't know you were actually creating. And I know, Olga, we talked about last week, you like to buy food fresh. So you're the complete opposite of me. I hate grocery shopping. I go once a week, man, and like that's enough for me. I try to never go to another grocery store. But for you, it's more of an adventure, and you really appreciate good food. So you know that you go regularly, and then you were sort of wondering at the time, do you spend more on other things when you're buying dinner, or do you just spend what you need dinner on? Right? So we had that discussion last week. And so it helps when you start writing things down, you sort of see where is the money going. And so questions, is there anything that was learned by tracking expenses? Anything you want to share?
Well, I've learned that when I go to the supermarket daily, I will buy things that I really don't need.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'll eat them,
Yeah.
or use them, but I really didn't need them. So maybe I should think this through as to how often I go into the supermarket.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a bad habit, I think.
And it comes down to, as well, what's really important to you. So fresh food is an adventure for you. Mm-hmm. And it's like a passion for you. It's important.
Mm-hmm.
So do you stop going to the grocery store frequently, or do you just stick to not buying so much? Your choice, right? And everybody works differently. We all have different behaviors. So you don't want to deprive yourself of what you really enjoy just for money. You want to find the balance between what makes you happy, but then how do you manage a behavior that's not as good for you? So, you know, let's tease that out a bit, right? It could be you only go shopping once a week, or it could be that you go shopping as frequently as you want to, but you make a list first. What do you need for dinner or supplies, and just stick to that. And that could mean that you, let's say if you like to buy fresh vegetables. So you walk in the door, you go directly to the vegetables, and then you go right to the closest cash register, right? And I know it's human nature. None of these things are bad. They just may not be serving you as well as you want them to, right?
But
So-
you have to look for sales too.
I'm sorry, Illuminati, say.
You have to look for sales.
Sales?
Before you go out.
Yeah, well, there you go. Okay, so then that starts you wandering, right? It's like, okay, I'll get what I need for dinner, but oh, then there might be sales. And then, okay, is it up and down every aisle, right? So it's tricky, and it's okay to test, right? It's okay to say, do I want to buy groceries once a week? And is that enough? But if you don't enjoy your food so much that way, and if food is really important, I do not believe in deprivation, right? Life is too short.
You're right.
So but it's a good observation, right?
It is.
Yeah. And so you just, now that you know it's something you do, that's the first step. When you track your expenses, I'm like, okay, now I'm aware, how much do I want to change it, and how do I change it? And sales, the tricky thing about sales, right, is
2, 4, 5.
well, and did you really need that in the first place? Right? So
I maybe.
it's like, wow, 2 for $5. Okay, but if you're only ever going to be able to eat one and the other one's going to go bad because it's so big or something, then it's really 1 for $5, right? Like I was talking with a woman about shopping at Costco. I don't know if you've ever noticed, they have these amazing cheesecakes, but they're huge, right? Huge. And she bought one for herself and her husband. And I'm thinking like, huge. So of course when you get it home, Costco is so big, you don't realize how big it is until you put it on your counter, right? And she said, but it was such a good deal. Well, they threw half of it out. So was half of it worth what you paid? Was it a good deal when you only ate half of it? And that's the question, right? And it's good to buy things on sale, so you know you need toilet paper, so you buy toilet paper on sale. But if chocolate bars are on sale, is that where you want to spend your money? And yes, you get 2 for 1, but if you weren't going to buy chocolate bars in the first place, you actually just spent money that you didn't need to. It's tricky. Sales are really attractive. Sales, suck us all in. It's like, wow, it's a big deal. Yeah, it's really interesting. So that's good. It's really good learning. So today we're going to talk about budgets. I actually call budgets spending plans. Psychologically, there's a difference. A spending plan is a budget. It's exactly the same thing. I call it a spending plan because a spending plan lets you spend. it's okay to spend because you have to spend and life is too short. A budget for people psychologically strikes fear, and it suggests deprivation. And deprivation never works. 95% of people who lose weight gain back their weight and more, right? And it's natural because you're depriving yourself and you're saying, I can't have this, I can't have this, I can't have this. And what happens is that, well, what does your mind think about? All the things you can't have until you want them so badly, you go for it. So there has to be fun in life, there have to be treats in life, things that are important to you, right? And that gets back to happiness. So you've got goals, but you've also got what do you really, really enjoy in life? And how do you get that happiness? And I can assure anyone, I've been doing this long enough, shopping is not happiness. It truly, truly isn't. Shopping is a national pastime, shopping is a habit. Now it could be, right? This is how you start dissecting things. Is it socialization, right? So one of my clients, she's single. She would go out to dinner a lot. And so I asked her, well, what is it? Is it the food? Well, actually, I like to cook. It's nice when somebody else cooks for me. But it wasn't really the food. And so we finally realized she just liked being around people and listening to the conversations to her right and left. Okay, what we did instead, because she was spending too much money eating out, she decided to eat in because she also had a goal to be healthier. So she would buy more food and cook herself, but she still needed to be social. She also loved to be creative. So she registered herself in a course, a creative course where she could sit around with other people one night a week, meet a lot of people, and be creative. So it's kind of dissecting why do you really do something that you no longer want to do, and how can you figure out a substitute? And we can talk a bit more about that after the rest of the lesson too. So, budgets, spending plans. We're going to talk about a zero-based budget today, which is kind of what we work toward. I'm going to ask you guys a question. What does living within your means mean? Living within your means.
That you're not broke every month. That means you're living within your means. You're not overspending.
Not
your
overspending.
income, whatever income comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that feel?
I'm hoping to be able to do that.
You will be able to do this. I assure you, because you're on such a good track already, right? How does it feel? How will it feel to live within your means?
It would be wonderful. I mean, you can breathe and not be worried about what's coming up.
Breathe,
Mhm.
not be worried. That's nice. Wonderful. Yeah, I like that.
So you can live within your means, and then there are unexpected stuff coming in,
Yeah.
and then
So,
you didn't plan for.
and there is a way to plan for that. It's called, first of all, there are a couple of things. One is periodic expenses, and the other is an emergency savings account. So let's talk about periodic expenses. A lot of people find some expenses are unexpected, when in reality, they're predictable, but they're irregular, right? So periodic means not consistently every month. So for instance, someone might say, oh my gosh, I had to do my car emissions this year, and it was $25, I wasn't planning. But what is it, every 2 years, I think, car emissions? Well, depending on the age of your car. For some cars, it's every year. So in reality, it's actually not a surprise because it will come next year, and you just have to put it down in a calendar or something like that. Now, there might be things like illness, right? Not predicted. So the idea behind a budget, and we'll get into this, is that when you can, part of your allocation of money is to put some away in savings for that emergency, if possible. And sometimes it's even $5 a week, because $5 a week, it's a little bit so it softens the blow when a surprise does come. It may not pay for all of it, but it pays at least for a chunk of it. And then if you can save more than $5 a week, then you build that emergency savings eventually, and you can borrow some of it to pay for one emergency and then rebuild the cushion. So life, absolutely, there are unpredictable things, for sure. And in an ideal world, that's what you try to do. We can't always do that, depending on our income. But if you were to get a little bit of a raise, if you can take a little bit of that and start building an emergency savings or something, then that's a way to start. And if you can't do it today, it's something to plan for the future, to know. So getting into that, let's talk about that a bit. So a zero-based budget is basically your net income minus fixed expenses and minus flexible expenses equals 0. So this is the simplest form. And so let's talk about this, and then we can build on it a bit, okay? So net income. Net income means your take-home pay. After you've paid taxes, after you've paid for Social Security, if you're paying for benefits, and it's your share of benefits, all of those things deducted before it goes into your account. Now, for some people, gross income, which means before deductions, is the same as net income if you're in real estate. So it's tricky. If you're in a profession where you don't pay taxes off the top of your income, you've got gross income coming in, and at the end of the year, you are going to have a whopping flexible expense called taxes for the year. So the way you would want to manage something like this is to say, okay, I just got a $30,000 check. You want to ask an accountant and say, this is what I made last year. And the accountant will say to you, or you can even look this up online if you can't afford to use an account. Look at what you made last year. Predict, if you make the same this year, what tax bracket are you in? And so how much will you owe in taxes at the end of the year? And let's say you're in the 30% tax bracket. So 30% of $30,000 is $9,000. So your net income would be the gross $30,000. You put $9,000 in a savings account for taxes, you have $21,000 left, and that's what you could spend. The other has to go away. But for most of us, we get net income. So that's the cash coming in. Then fixed expenses, and we covered this a bit last session. Fixed expenses are quite often things that we sign contracts for. So a mortgage or rent, a car loan, insurance, things like that that are sort of official and they're going to run after you if you don't pay on time. Then flexible expenses can be things like groceries, clothing, entertainment, fun.
Why do you say that groceries is flexible? Because you've got to eat, so.
Yep, and that's a very good question. Depending on you, what you might want to do is say groceries are fixed because I have to eat, and I think I can live within $100 a week. I'm just throwing a round number out there, right? So you might put groceries in here of $100, but then you might say to yourself, okay, my flexible, which is what I can do anything with at the end of the day, I can spend more on groceries or I can spend some on clothing. So it depends on how you want to think about your budget. Usually, and it would be the same with like a cell phone too, right? Like you're charged a minimum per month, but sometimes if you have kids who use a lot of data on their cell phones, you've got your typical cell phone bill and then you've got the surprise. Yeah. So it depends on how you want to look at it. And if your cell phone bill, my cell phone bill is pretty predictable. So mine, I might put into a fixed expense because it really doesn't change that much. But the whole idea is whatever makes sense to you, and this is what's coming in, minus this is 0. So that's the simple form. Once you are able to, what you want to do is add another one in here called savings. Now, some people have savings taken out of their paycheck already, right? 401k contributions, pension contributions, things like that. So you may already be saving for retirement in particular by the time this paycheck comes into your bank account. But then, getting back to those surprise expenses, there's another savings bucket, and that savings bucket might be vacation. It might be emergency savings that you want to allocate some of your paycheck to and not just cover your expenses. So if you can't do that day one, that's okay, but it's something that you aspire to.
You can also tell the bank to do it for you for savings. If you tell it on the 10th of the month, take $10 out. and
Yes.
putting in my savings.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Have the bank, and again, this goes back to behaviors, right? If you have deductions taken out of your paycheck immediately, then you never see it. If you trust yourself enough that you know you're going to keep money in the bank to some degree, then yeah, you can tell the bank to take it out of your paycheck account and put it in a savings for you, for sure. And the way you can do that is if your paycheck lands on the second Thursday, have the bank take out the savings on the Friday before you spend the rest of it, right? So there are tricks to manage yourself based on how you know you work, right? Everybody's different. It's just knowing who you are, knowing where your money emotion lies, where your behaviors and triggers lie, and managing it so that you start to change your behaviors. Yeah. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's called like a zero-based budget. Illumina is smirking over there, you're laughing. What would you do? Would you have the bank take it out of your account? Or are you good? Could you take money out of your account and walk it over to a whole different bank, right? Separate bank that you actually have to walk to or drive to, so it's a real pain. Keep your savings account there so that when you have an impulse to take money out, you actually have to make a real effort to go do it.
Yes, I would do that.
Would you do that?
Mhm.
Yeah. I have another client who does that. She hates walking and she loves to walk in high heels, right? And 4 blocks away, I will never walk to that bank. So it's perfect. She has the money transferred and put in there automatically, and she never goes there. She never takes it out. And it's not a checking account, so the only way she can withdraw is if she has a debit card attached to it, which she doesn't. She refused to get a debit card, so she can't go to an ATM. And so she actually has to go there and withdraw the cash, and she never withdraws it. And it's sat there for 2 years, nice and safe. And every time she gets a bonus, a chunk of it goes in there and it sits there nice and safe, and it's just growing and growing. It's perfect. So it just depends on who you are. So what do you guys think of budgeting? What does that say to you? What does it mean?
It tells me that you have to know how much money you earn per month, and you have to know where it goes. And basically, that's the only way to control being in trouble. Because you owe this one or you owe the other, and you don't have the money, whatever.
Yeah.
And it also controls you from spending it too, if you have a budget, because you know how much money you have to spend. So, it sounds easy, but I guess you've got to look at a budget. I mean, you might be a quarterly person that looks at it every 3 months, so to see if you have to shift something around.
Yeah.
Or you might be a person that wants to look at it every year, or every month for that matter.
Yeah, some people, they find it soothing once they get it in order, because it's calming to see that everything is going to the right place, and they're able to sit down and pay their bills every month and feel good about paying their bills. It can be very, they feel like they're in control. So for some people, it can be quite reassuring. And for women, sometimes it's a challenge, because money is always emotional for men and women, but the world tells us that we're not good at so many things, right? We're not good at our hair, so we have to buy special shampoos, and then we have to color it because our natural color isn't good enough. We have to buy mascara because our eyelashes aren't pretty enough. We all have to lose weight because we don't look like models. We all have to wear high heels because our legs don't look long enough without high heels. And it goes on, right? So society tells us every day we're not good enough at all these things. And yet at the same time, it feeds us, so we think, oh, we're not going to be good enough at our money either. And so for some people, it can be, doing a budget can be terrifying. Terrifying because what if I fail? What if I guess at my budget and it's wrong? So what do you think about that, Illuminata? What if you plan your spending for May and you make a pretty good guess at all of May, what you think you're going to spend, and you're wrong? How do you feel about that?
I can say I will do much better the next month.
Yeah. It's good. No, that's absolutely right. You're not going to be perfect, and that's entirely okay. You create the budget, you reflect, and you do better the next month because you're smarter. You realize where you spent money that you didn't think you would. So yeah, a lot of people are fearful, and some people are fearful of learning the truth, learning about how much money they really are spending and not being able to stop. And I can assure you, every woman I have ever met is capable of managing her cash. Very capable. It's just emotion that gets in the way, not just. I mean, emotion is emotion. But some of those emotions we learned as kids, we talked about in the first class. Money, emotion. Your capabilities are there, it's just emotion that tells you you can't do it or you may not do it well enough. And I can tell you right now, you will. You absolutely will. You're all capable of doing this. So here's what a budget teaches you. It teaches you some new skills sometimes, planning ahead. So sometimes people live one paycheck, so they think 2 weeks ahead until the next paycheck comes. So it's a new skill to think further out. And Olga, you mentioned some people may plan 3 months out and then check in, right? So it's teaching a whole new skill to sort of plan a few months out. It's teaching another skill, which is discipline. So checking in regularly on your budget and capturing your expenses and comparing them. So these are like new skills. It also teaches you what I refer to as money mindfulness. So when you start looking at what's on your budget and what's on your paper, you start automatically thinking about, and this comes naturally, the more you just write these things down, you start thinking about, okay, after my fixed expenses, I only have $400 left on flexible expenses. So then you just naturally start saying, okay, I think this week, and I'm only the first week in the month, I've already spent on dinner, I've already spent a bit more on the drugstore because I had an unexpected expense, you know, my cough medicine, prescriptions because somebody got sick. So then you start realizing, oh my gosh, I have $400 left for the month and I just used $150. So it starts making you more aware, so then your mind says, okay, I've got $250 left over the next 3 weeks. How do I sort of keep track of that and manage it? And when you write it down, this starts happening naturally. It's, that's the beauty of it. So what I want to do is take you to pages 34 and 35 in your books, and you will see two pages that look like this, right? So one has everything written in for you, and the other is totally blank, right? So the one written in for you is going to be your estimate for May. That's going to be your May budget that you're planning ahead on. So you may find some categories here are not your categories. You may not have some of these expenses. So feel free to add others below or cross some of these out and write in something that you would spend money on. On the far left column is income. There are a number of things in here that may or may not apply to you. So if they don't apply to you, feel free to ignore them. For instance, there are bonuses, there's salary and wages, self-employment income. So self-employment income, if you're in real estate or something, that's where your spending plan would go in. Business income might be if you have a business and you draw from that. Bonuses, some people get bonuses quarterly at the end of the year, other people don't. Things like rental income. So we can go through the list. I don't want to bore all of you. If there are some here that you've never heard of, I'm happy to explain what they are, so we can do that a little later if you want. Interest income. Interest right now is so low, we don't get a lot of interest income on our checking accounts, but if you have some that comes in and you're able to spend that, then you would put that in here too, and you would see that on your statements. So this gives you the head start for May. And if you've been tracking expenses so far for 2 weeks, you may be able to just double that, sort of, and sort of say, okay, this is what I think is going to happen in May. Doubling is sort of a quick way of doing it. It may not be doubling, right? Because you may have some things that you only do once a month. Or in May, you may have something that you did not do in April. Haircuts. Maybe you didn't go to your Pilates class that you have to pay for at the door. All these things. So the trick in planning ahead is sort of to say, okay, what have I spent so far? Is it likely to be the same or not? So then you adjust up or down. You may have had a guest in your house, so you spent $50 more in groceries the last week, but you know that's unusual. So take the $50 off and say, in May, I don't think I've got any guests, so my groceries are going to be X per week. So, you know, and it's guessing, right? And as Illuminata said, it's okay if it's not perfect, and you're just going to try better the next month. So that's what you predict. This is what you predict May will be. And then I'm going to ask you to keep tracking your expenses and track your expenses through May, and then you're going to put them on the blank sheet. So you can put the same categories in here for all your expenses, add them up for each category, and then you're going to compare what you've actually spent versus what you thought you were going to spend. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah? Okay. And if you have any questions, you also have my email. You can ask me. Somebody's horn out there. You can ask me by email, or you can call me too if you have any challenges with this. So we'll check in the next session too, because you'll have been tracking for another couple of weeks.
So
And we'll see.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, we should do the month of April to the end, is that what you want?
You can. That's a good question. So where we started was almost at the beginning of April. So what I would suggest is, if you've been tracking since almost the beginning of April, continue tracking for the rest of April. And then you've got almost a month.
Yeah.
So then you can just take that month and you can put it into May and sort of say, is anything going to be different?
Right.
And if you haven't been tracking yet, then it will be almost 2 weeks, right? 2 more weeks in April, almost totally. We're at the 19th. So even if you track that, it will give you an idea of what you almost spend in 2 weeks and what you definitely spend in a week. So that might help you, because you might say, okay, in May I have 4 weeks approximately. Do I multiply it by 4, or is there anything different? So I definitely tracking, because first of all, it's a new behavior to track. Second of all, it helps you see patterns, because you don't always see your spending patterns just in the first month, right? Sometimes things reveal themselves as they go along, because you get smarter about it. You catch one pattern and you change it, and then you realize, oh, there are other patterns that you want to change too. So it's kind of an ongoing learning for a few months. Some people like to do budgets forever once they start. That's not necessarily necessary. It's to build mindfulness and to help you see where the money's going. So, for example, you may develop such a clear idea of what you spend on groceries. It's not a big deal anymore. If you want to manage your behaviors and you don't trust yourself, then you might want to stick with a budget. It's totally up to you though. Now, to track, just to sort of go through that and to build your budget, because nobody has been tracking a whole month. Where do you go to find what you've spent? How do you guys spend your money? Do you use debit cards, credit cards, cash?
All three.
All three? Okay. So for cash receipts, here's what I do with some clients who prefer to use cash receipts. Put an envelope in your purse and try to get in the habit of taking the receipt and putting it in the envelope. If you can get a bright envelope, something that's not white, it's even better. Or, you know, like a nice little envelope that you would put stationery in, or a gift card, or sorry, a birthday card or something. Something that sticks out at you every time you open your purse to get your wallet, right? Something that you see. Or it could just be like a little makeup bag or something that you can get at a drugstore for like $1 or whatever. Put that in your purse so that when you open to get the cash out of your wallet, you see that and you remind yourself, okay, get the cash receipt and put it in. So that's how you can try to track all your cash receipts. Second of all, for debit cards, then you have your bank statements. So you can whether you get your bank statement in the mail or online. Pull it up online and look at all of your expenses in there. So, for example, groceries. Let's say you buy your groceries by debit card. If you pull up your bank statement, you can usually tell if it's Stop and Shop, ShopRite, or wherever you go. Add them all up. And then if that's basically a month, then you can translate that over to your May statement. And then you can go through and look for your drugstore expenses by debit card. And then if it feels good, print it out, cross them off, and see what's left so that you don't forget an expense. And then it's the same with a credit card statement, right? If you have a credit card, some people prefer to never use credit cards, which is perfectly fine too. Go through your statement and tick them all off and make sure they go into the category for May. And so that's how you start to build your budget. And then you can keep tracking to see how you bump up against it. And so you estimate your income. Do you guys both get paychecks? So you have like a net income going into your account or by check? Yeah. So you don't have to worry about being in real estate or
I have
anything.
a net and the other also. But what I usually tell them is to take 10% federal. I don't worry about the other stuff
Yeah.
until the end of the year.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
I just don't even figure it out, just say take 10%.
Yeah. So and you find that works out for you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So then there may be a little surprise at the end, but if you know it's manageable, that's okay, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. That's what you do. Just have them take some off and it's set aside and you're covered.
And then I don't have to worry too much about it.
Yes, yes. No, that's very good. That's very good. I had a client the other day, her husband got upset because they had to pay $8,000 in taxes. But he said, why did that happen? She said, she owns her own business. She said, because I made more money, dear. So that's okay. She had the money to pay it, and it was a good thing. My preference is, and everybody works differently, you want to set money aside to pay your taxes. But if you have too much taken off, the government sits on it for a whole year when you could be using it. So it just behaviors, right? If you don't think you can save for taxes, have them take it off and have them take too much if you're worried. But if you, or just enough, right? If you're not sure, be conservative and have them take more than enough. But if you think you can save and you'll have the money at the end of the year, then it's better in your pocket than in the government's pocket. So it just kind of depends on who you are and how you work, right? Okay, so there's just one last thing I wanted to cover. So estimate income, estimate your expenses, adjust the budget. Once we have a month of expenses, we're going to say, hey, what did we learn about the budget? And try to live within that budget, whatever you give yourself. So once you do it for May, try to live within it, and then let's see what happens. I just wanted to share one more thing. And this is just one example, there's the 50-30-20 rule. And this comes from Elizabeth Warren, who is a real advocate of wanting to help people be financially literate, right? And the 50% is fixed expenses, the 30% is flexible, and the 20% is savings. So she suggests what you do is you just walk around thinking 50, I think she actually does 50, 20, 30. So it's something to just live by if that works for you. 50% fixed, because as we know, things like mortgages, car loans, they're all the big expenses, right? 20% savings, 30% flexible. It just depends on who you are, but if you create your own formula that works for you, it's just like another goal. It's kind of like a rule to live by. What I used to do when I was younger, I would take my bonus, my year-end bonus, and I would give myself 10% to play with. 10% was fun, and the rest got put away in savings. That was just my personal rule. And every time I got a raise, I would take a percentage of the raise for the year, and that would go to savings. So they were just my rules, and that gave me discipline. It's whatever works for you. So this is a rule that Elizabeth Warren created because 20% savings a year is a good, healthy savings to aspire to. Sometimes that can't happen, but she's holding it up as an example. Some people say you should try to save 40% a year, right? Well, it depends. It depends on your income level. And if 50% is going to your rent of your net pay, then the likelihood of saving 40% is not high, right? So it depends on you. And that's all. It's a way of sort of giving yourself a rule so that if you get extra cash, how do you try to preserve some of it to take care of yourself later in life while still having fun today, right? 30% is sort of flexible, fun, you can buy clothing, all that stuff you allow yourself to do. And then 20% is savings. So 30% spending today, 20% for spending tomorrow, and 50% covering the stuff you absolutely have to cover. It's just, it's an example. You can choose your own thing. So what I would encourage is that so we've got a bit of homework here, guys. I know this, but trust me, hopefully it's all good. Continue tracking your expenses. I gave you sheets for that. I have added sheets, actually, if anyone needs them. Work on your May budget. And there's a bit of reading to do on Chapter 5, right? So now we're really getting into the meat of the program.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is what will really make a difference in your life starting tonight. Don't forget the goals. Goals are important. Now we're getting into tracking expenses, budgeting, and we're going to start looking at what shows up in that budget. Okay? So I'd like to thank Greater Austin TV for recording us tonight. This is the end of that session. And now we're going to talk about all the fun stuff once we turn the recorder off. Thank you.